Hello and welcome. I am Pranay Upadhyay and you are watching Namaste World, your daily window into the biggest stories shaping India and the world. We begin in East Asia, where Taiwan unveils its ambitious T-dome air shield to counter rising Chinese threats. Back in South Asia, India posts a strong 8.2% GDP growth, but the IMF questions how accurate the numbers really are. In America, global chaos erupts as Airbus grounds thousands of A320 jets over critical safety faults. India gears up for a secretive K-5 missile test amid rising Chinese surveillance. But the biggest news of the day: President Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff will meet President Putin in Moscow as corruption turmoil hits Kyiv, making next 48 hours critical for peace. All that and more. Global flashpoints, power plays and the stories that matters coming up in this edition of Namaste World. President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is set to hold a crucial sit-down meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday in Moscow. This one-on-one comes straight after marathon talks in Florida between President Donald Trump's team and top Ukrainian officials. Trump says there's now a real shot at a peace deal, but fresh corruption scandal in Kyiv is throwing sand in gears. Zelenskyy just fired his chief of staff and his lead negotiator over it. Timing could not be tighter to drive an agreement, as President Vladimir Putin flies to India on December 4th and 5th this week. So, next 48 hours in Moscow could decide if war finally stops or drags on. Taiwan is racing to build one of its most ambitious defense system, yet a multi-layered T-dome air shield designed to counter Chinese growing military aggression. Inspired by Israel's Iron Dome, it aims to link radars, missiles and sensors into a one rapid response network. But will this sweeping upgrade be ready in time? Here is a report by Farhan Khan.
Taiwan is gearing up for one of its most ambitious defense upgrades yet. A sweeping multi-layered air shield known as the T-dome. It's a system designed to protect the island from Chinese jets, missiles and drones at a time when Beijing's threats are getting louder and far more aggressive. Think of the T-dome as Taiwan's version of Israel's Iron Dome. While Iron Dome tackles short-range rockets, Taiwan's T-dome has to deal with a buffet of threats: PLA fighter aircraft, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and the rapidly expanding world of combat drones. Taiwan already has powerful air defense platforms like the US-made Patriot missiles and its domestically developed Skybow system. It's also waiting for the American NASAMS units, but here's the catch. These systems aren't enough unless they are stitched together seamlessly. That's where the T-dome comes in, integrating radars, sensors and interceptor weapons. So everything talks to each other and reacts within seconds. The system will have two big jobs. First, a central command brain that gathers radar data, identifies what's coming in, and decides which interceptor to fire. And second, the actual interception layer, the missiles, guns, and future directed energy weapons that physically knock incoming threats out of the sky. Why now? Taiwan has studied Ukraine's experience closely. One major takeaway: without strong air defenses, even the best equipped military can be paralyzed. China already has hundreds of missiles pointed at Taiwan, and experts warn that Chinese warships near the island could fire hundreds more within minutes. Neutralizing even part of that first strike could be the difference between survival and collapse. So, when will the T-dome be ready? Not immediately. Taiwan is still waiting for billions of dollars worth of US arms, and integrating the entire system will take years. President Lai Ching-te says the goal is high combat readiness by 2027 and a full resilient defense architecture by 2033. The full T-dome won't be done by 2027, but every step forward boosts Taiwan's deterrence. In the end, the T-dome isn't just a military project. It's Taiwan's message to Beijing: we see you, we are preparing, and we are not going down without a fight. with Farhan Khan. Bureau Report, India Today Global.
India has posted an impressive 8.2% GDP growth for the July to September quarter, once again outpacing China and cementing its position as world's fastest growing economy. But the International Monetary Fund has simultaneously handed India a troubling C grade for data quality, raising doubts about how accurate these numbers really are. So how fast is India truly growing? Here is a report by Debangana Datta.
India just clocked 8.2% GDP growth in the July-September quarter. This is the fastest pace in 6 quarters, and once again, India is the world's fastest growing major economy. To put that in perspective, China grew at 4.8%. India's nearly double that. Prime Minister Modi called it very encouraging, a reflection of pro-growth policies and reforms. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman emphasized sustained fiscal consolidation and targeted public investments as the driving forces. But here's what really happened. Factories ramped up production ahead of the GST rate cut, announced on Independence Day. The cut came into effect on September 22nd, just before the festive season. Perfect timing. Private consumer spending, which makes up 57% of the GDP, rose by 7.9%. Manufacturing output jumped 9.1%. Even with US tariffs hitting Indian exports with an additional 25% levy in August, domestic momentum carried the economy forward. India's chief economic advisor V. Anantha Nageshwaran projects the economy will cross $4 trillion in this fiscal year. The full year outlook? 7% growth or higher. That's the headline, but here's the catch. Just days before these GDP numbers dropped, the International Monetary Fund gave India's national account statistics a C grade, the second lowest rating on their 4-tier scale. So what does a C mean? Quote, data have some shortcomings that somewhat hamper surveillance. The IMF identified specific problems. India still uses 2011 and 12 as the base year for calculating GDP. That's 14 years outdated. The methodology relies on wholesale price indices instead of proper producer price indices. And there are sizable discrepancies between different approaches to measuring GDP. Production versus expenditure. Translation: the data does not adequately capture the informal sector or people's actual spending patterns. Congress leader Jairam Ramesh called it ironic that these GDP numbers were released right after the IMF's assessment. He questioned the unrealistically low GDP deflator, showing inflation at just 0.5%, completely at odds with what ordinary households experience at the grocery store. Here's the thing. The Ministry of Statistics is working on updating both the GDP and CPI base years and methodology. The new series is expected in early to mid-2026. Until then, we have robust growth numbers and serious questions about how accurately they reflect India's economic reality. This is not the first time. The IMF gave India a C grade last year too, noting data weaknesses have remained broadly unchanged. So yes, India is growing fast. But how fast really? That's the $4 trillion question. With Debangana Datta, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
Air travel worldwide has been thrown into a disarray after Airbus urgently recalled nearly 6,000 A320 family jets, including more than 200 flying in India, following a mid-air computer failure linked to solar radiation. With aircraft grounded, schedules disrupted, and airlines scrambling, the impact is spiraling fast. How long will this crisis keep the skies unstable? Here is a report by Sharik Sahab.
Air travel has been thrown into chaos across the world, and India is right in the middle of the storm. Airbus has issued an urgent recall for nearly 6,000 A320 family aircraft, the most widely used passenger jets on the planet. And here's the twist: more than 200 of those planes belonged to Indian carriers like Indigo and Air India. So, what went wrong? It all started with a terrifying mid-air incident on a JetBlue A320 from Cancun to New York. The aircraft reportedly plunged suddenly and without command injured more than a dozen passengers. When Airbus dug deeper, the culprit pointed to a critical flight computer called ELAC, responsible for controlling the plane's pitch. And the reason behind the failure? Solar radiation. Yes, you heard that right. Experts say powerful solar activity and coronal mass ejections can cause bit flips, tiny glitches that can corrupt vital flight control data at high altitudes. To fix this, Airbus has ordered a mandatory software rollback and for some jets, even hardware replacements. In India, that means over 200 A320s, the backbone of domestic travel, must be grounded for 2 to 3 days. The DGCA has already banned affected A319, A320 and A321 aircraft from operating until upgrades are complete. Air India says passengers may face delays and longer turnaround times, while Indigo warns of schedule changes, insisting that safety comes first. Globally, airlines from the US to Australia are scrambling. Jetstar has cancelled 90 flights. American Airlines is updating hundreds of jets, and South America has paused ticket sales. But the bigger headache, India's aviation sector, which relies heavily on the A320 family for short and medium routes, is bracing for one of the biggest operational disruptions in years. With engineers racing against the clock, airlines hope to return to normalcy by early next week. Until then, travelers buckle up, because this turbulence is far from over. With Shaurik Shah, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
A quiet but unmistakable military buildup is unfolding in the Bay of Bengal, where new no-fly alerts and Chinese research vessels point to a possible test of India's secretive K-5 submarine-launched nuclear missile. As both India and China maneuvers above and below the ocean surface, is a deeper underwater rivalry now underway. Here is a report by Rudrashish Kanjilal.
A quiet build-up is happening in the Bay of Bengal, the kind officials will never admit on record. But the signs are unmistakable. India could be preparing to test the K-5 submarine-launched ballistic missile, one of the most secretive weapons in its nuclear arsenal. New aviation warnings, NOTAMs, have been issued for a massive no-fly zone stretching nearly 14,000 kilometers from the coast of Visakhapatnam. That distance mirrors previous notifications for long-range ballistic missile trials. And the launch area sits right next to the Eastern Naval Command, home to India's nuclear submarines. Put those dots together and the most plausible candidate is the K-5, a missile with a range of over 6,000 kilometers designed to be fired from India's nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, the SSBNs. If the test goes ahead, it likely originates from INS Arihant or INS Arighat, India's frontline SSBNs. These submarines are the most survivable leg of India's nuclear deterrent. Hidden underwater for months, they are built to launch missiles even if every land and air asset is wiped out. This is the core of second strike capability, the ability to retaliate after a nuclear hit. And for India, that survivability increasingly depends on the Bay of Bengal, where it is developing a defended bastion for submarine patrols. But India isn't the only one watching. The moment the NOTAM was issued, China began moving in a familiar cast of so-called research vessels. 4 ships, Lanhai 101, Lanhai 201, Shanghai Yihao and Xi'an 6 are already heading into or operating inside the Indian Ocean. Lanhai 101, officially an aquaculture research ship, is heading towards Sri Lanka's Gaur. Xi'an 6 is moving towards Mauritius. Shanghai Yihao carries a deep-sea manned submersible, and Lanhai 201 has been conducting seabed mapping near Diego Garcia. These ships have shown up before, every time India prepares to test a strategic missile. They position themselves along likely trajectories, collecting telemetry leaks, acoustic signatures, and any data Indian sensors fail to shield. There have even been occasions when India delayed or cancelled tests because Chinese vessels loitered too close. The timing is never a coincidence, it's a pattern. Right now, India's only fully deployed SLBM is the K-15, with a range of just 750 kilometers. It has also tested the K-4 SLBM, which has a range of 3,500 kilometers. Open source defense analysis suggests that the K-5, with a speculated 5,000 to 6,000 kilometer range, would allow Indian SSBNs to strike strategic targets from the safety of the Indian Ocean without leaving protected waters. But China's interest is not limited to one missile test. Its survey vessels are quietly mapping the Indian Ocean's underwater environment, the thermoclines, the salinity layers, the seabed ridges and trenches that decide whether submarines stay hidden or get detected. Modern submarine warfare is a battle of acoustics. Whoever understands how sound moves underwater gains the advantage to hide their own submarines and to expose the enemies. For India, building a secure bastion depends on ensuring its SSBNs remain invisible. China is working just as hard to ensure it can hear them. Whether the missile being tested in early December is indeed the K-5 or another long-range system, the stakes are clear. India is steadily pushing its sea-based nuclear deterrent towards real operational strength, and China, through its oceanographic research, is working to challenge that strength. Not in the air, not on land, but deep beneath the Indian Ocean.
As we wrap up today's show, here's a quick look at the top stories making waves around the world. Sri Lanka is battling its deadliest flooding in a decade as a cyclone Ditwa leaves hundreds dead or missing and rescue teams race to reach devastated communities. A Bangladesh court has sentenced British MP Tulip Sadiq and former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in absentia on corruption charges linked to an allegedly illegal allocation. Russian President Vladimir Putin has approved visa-free entry for Chinese tourists, business travelers and professionals for up to 30 days, further strengthening Moscow-Beijing ties. Chinese top military companies have reported a rare revenue decline as sweeping corruption purges delay arms contracts, raising new doubts about Beijing's long-term modernization timelines. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Namaste World. From breakthroughs in technology and business to political developments and natural disasters. Stay tuned as we bring you the latest updates, key developments and more from New Delhi to New York. See you again tomorrow right here at the same time on Namaste World.